The very first instance of the United States government actively assisting in the military takeover of power in a foreign country in Iran. It was the first military coup in a foreign country that was actively aided by the American intelligence agency, the CIA. Back then, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of the democratically elected leader of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. The covert operation was known as Operation Ajax, aimed at protecting Western oil interests. The CIA, along with the British intelligence, the MI5, supported the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, in regaining power. This coup marked a significant shift in US foreign policy, emphasizing its own interests over democratic principles. Cut to 2023, almost 70 years later, there's been a military mutiny in Africa, in Niger, involving US-trained officers. But 3 weeks after the takeover of power in Niger, the Pentagon refuses to call this a coup d'etat. After a military junta, which calls itself the National Council for Safeguarding the Fatherland, seized power on the 26th of July and detained the democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, France and the European Union, on the other hand, were quick to call this a coup. But weeks later, in public statements, Pentagon officials have repeatedly stopped short of using that word. On Crux Decode, when does the US government call a foreign mutiny as a coup? How does the nomenclature affect US government institutions from continuing military and non-military aid to the said country? And why are the United States and France, who are long-standing allies, split right down the middle on the coup in Niger? US coup legislation, which is specifically Section 7008 of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, specifies that any country whose duly elected head of government is deposed by a military coup or decree will be automatically prohibited from receiving a broad package of congressional assistance. The Pentagon's reluctance to call a coup may be aimed at preserving the ability of the US government to continue to provide security assistance to Niger. Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh was pressed last week about why the US has not called this takeover a coup. In response, she said, "This certainly looks like an attempted coup." Now, since 2012, US taxpayers have spent more than $500 million on the partnership with Niger, making it one of the largest security assistance programs in sub-Saharan Africa. Niger hosts one of the largest and most expensive drone bases run by the US military. Built in the northern city of Agadez at a price tag of more than $100 million and maintained every year between $20 and $30 million, Airbase 201 is a surveillance hub. It is also a linchpin of an archipelago of US outposts in West Africa. It is home to Space Force personnel, it has a Joint Special Operations Air Command, and a fleet of drones, including the armed MQ-9 Reapers. In the month prior to the coup, the drone outpost was the site of a meeting between Brigadier General Musa Salou Barmo, who is an American-trained chief of the Nigerian Special Forces, and Lieutenant General Jonathan Braga, who is the head of the US Army Special Operations Command. Within weeks, General Barmo helped topple the democratically elected pro-Western president Mohamed Bazoum. In fact, the coup leaders have since threatened the visiting US Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, who was of course the one who famously choreographed and navigated the coup in Ukraine in 2014. They physically said that they would eliminate Bazoum if Victoria Nuland were to push the envelope further. Nuland has since backed off. The coup in Niger has been a humiliating setback for France and a terrible drama for President Emmanuel Macron. He's been, of course, striding the global stage as a passionate advocate of Ukraine's national sovereignty. Macron is egging on ECOWAS to invade Niger and rescue Bazoum, but that seems to be an increasingly futile effort. For Macron personally, this has been a terrible occurrence, as he's lost his best supporter in Africa for France's neo-colonial policies. He misread the groundswell behind the coup and gambled that Niger's military would splinter. Now, to be sure, his overreaction boomeranged because the coup leaders overnight abrogated any military pact that they had with Paris. And the latent animosity towards France has surged on account of its predatory policies in Niger and, of course, an anti-colonial mindset in that country. France has ceded the leadership of this emerging situation to Washington. The stakes for France in Niger are much higher than the stakes are for Washington. It is a psychological and strategic defeat for France. In West Africa, France is accustomed to seeing other world powers follow its lead. That is not happening in the case of Niger. While France and the US remain closely aligned on a range of topics, including, of course, Russia's aggression of Ukraine, several points of tension have emerged between the oldest allies in recent years. And that includes differences over a security partnership with Australia, the US, the United Kingdom, which is called AUKUS, also ties with China. France wants a more benign approach to China. And the most important and most recent one, America's Inflation Reduction Act, which France and the European sphere will siphon away investment from Europe. So then the question that's being asked is, will this split the oldest allies across the Atlantic between Paris and Washington, D.C.? Well, the answers may be in faraway Niger.